It's about the experience. That's a buzzword being increasingly heard when the subject of retailing and retailing's future comes up. Traditional bricks and mortar retailers have been grappling with the challenge from online sellers and e-commerce for some time now, and concerns exist that the future of retailing may well skew more online than in-store. But retail shops are far from helpless in the face of technology and online behemoths. They can exploit their in-store experience, the pleasure their customers obtain from stopping in and browsing and maybe buying, to offset what some may see as the convenience of shopping by mouse click, along with competing on price. What does all this mean for Manchester and other communities of Bennington County, where retailing is such a major part of local economies? We talked with several local retailers and people in the industry, as well as a consultant over in Saratoga Springs, to understand some of the dynamics in play right now. We started off at the Manchester Community Library, where we talked with Matt Harrington, the Executive Director of the Bennington Area Chamber of Commerce, after a conversation with a group of local retailers who were discussing trends in their businesses.
So I think obviously there's still some nervousness around online and Amazon, being probably the prime example. After this year, Amazon will account for 51% of all online transactions, which is kind of crazy to think about. But really, how do small shops and small businesses and retail shops compete with online shopping? A couple of the really interesting things we've heard and we've seen is really creating that customer experience, and I think there is still that want and need, and I think the retailers that were here today were talking about that, which is people purchasing still want to know their clerk at their local store, or still want to be fitted by somebody from their local town, or talk to somebody at that retail store. And I think what we've seen by some of the more innovative retail stores is doubling down on that experience. And so that experience might translate into social media and doing touch points along the way. That experience might be doing an event every so often for your customers and inviting specific customers to come in to know that they're appreciated. One person sends out $5 off cards with a thank you card to their customers. So we found that small businesses in Southern Vermont are scrappy, and they're innovative, and they're creative in how to get customers into their store.
We then headed over to Manchester's Town Hall, where we asked the town manager, John O'Keefe, to interpret the tax data that's being reported to the state and explain the activity that it was showing.
The past couple years of retail sales have actually been pretty flat, I would call them. We've had little increases or little decreases, but I think if you were to draw a line through all the points on the data, you'd actually probably see a pretty flat line. The one that we're seeing increase meteorically, sometimes 10% over the same quarter in the previous year, is meals, rooms, and alcohol. So people are coming here. We are seeing traffic, we are seeing people come visit, but it does seem like they're buying less things that go in bags, less retail. We've also seen some retail. It's interesting. You kind of divide it into two categories, I guess, is really an easy way to do it. One is competing with Amazon, and the other one is not competing with Amazon. So in a previous interview, I used actual Nature's Market. John, who owns the store, put a big investment in there. It's food. He's now moved into wine. He's got various different baguettes, for example. So you can't buy a baguette on Amazon. So I think that side of retail, especially the food side, you've got the butcher shop, you've got Fortuna's, which has really interesting sausages and cheeses that you can't get on Amazon. Those businesses actually really seem like they're pushing the bar up. You've got other ones that may be competing more with Amazon. For example, it wasn't just here in Manchester, but regionally and nationally, Radio Shack went out of business. And I think that was a business that was competing really head-on with Amazon. For example, a 6-foot HDMI patch cord at a store might cost 2 to 3 times more than what Amazon would ship it to you for 2 days. And your options would be greater. You'd have a 3-foot, a 6-foot, a 9-foot, a 12-foot, a 20-foot option. And if you're buying it locally, you may only have a 6-foot option. So I think that kind of store that's competing head-on with Amazon does seem like nationally isn't more in danger than the stores that sell like a unique experience. Like another example that comes to mind is All Things Vermont on Depot Street, which is selling very unique Vermont products and New England products that people are buying.
So over we went to Above All Vermont to talk with the owner, John Moran, to learn about his secret sauce and how to compete with the likes of Amazon.
I don't think I can survive solely on Vermont, but I try to keep it as local as possible. I do believe a lot of people coming through here, and this is a tourist state, clearly, they want a Vermont experience. So they want local products, they want specialty foods from Vermont, made by Vermonters, and they respond to that. And we get a lot of feedback saying how wonderful some of these products are, because there really are some wonderful products. We also blend in other mix of things that balance out nostalgia, an old feeling of going to a country store. I wanted to replicate essentially what I had experienced when I was a kid. So when people come in here, they have a what I would call a Vermont experience. It contributes to their whole trip up here and fond memories. You cannot. I think it's important to take a look at what you can sell that meets a niche market that is not easily duplicated on Amazon or some of the other online stores. And then you combine that with something that's eye-appealing to people who come in. You give them great customer service. You go out of your way to make sure that when they leave here, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to tell their relatives. Great store I just went to. And that in itself is your word-of-mouth advertising. Over time, it pays off.
Not far away, right on the heart of Main Street, sits Rathlogan Castle, which brings the Highlands of Scotland to downtown Manchester. There we talked with owner Robert Jones to get his perspective on Manchester and retailing.
One of the things that hurts the town is much of its advertising still promotes it as an outlet town, an outlet shopping. And yet when people get here, they find that many of the outlets that they were used to have gone. They find all too often, empty spaces. And so they then have to go searching for anything else. And they stumble across places like us, but unfortunately, because their preconception is outlet, they expect discounts everywhere. It doesn't bode well for a good retail experience. More than one customer has said to me recently, there's nothing much to come back to town for. And we actually tried online for 3 years and it didn't work. Since we've gone bricks and mortar, it's worked very well. And it's because the product's unique and the customer wants to touch and feel it. Amazon gets thrown at me all too often. My take on Amazon is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with Amazon, and Amazon is not actually damaging retail. The damage is being done by the consumer who wants to get cheaper and cheaper product, and by the manufacturers or vendors who choose to use Amazon as their vehicle to make their life simpler. In other words, I guess we can look at it on both sides and say the manufacturers and the consumers have become a little lazy. But when it comes to us, I see us as a boutique type store, and it really doesn't impact us. Our customers look for a higher end product, they're looking for quality, and that's what we provide. The one thing Amazon can never provide is quality one-to-one service.
Before Amazon got into selling almost everything that could be shipped from a fulfillment center, they sold books, remember? Chris Morrow, the owner of the Northshire Bookstore, explains what he's learned over the years about how to keep going.
Our answer, and I think this applies to other retail too, is to focus on what we do well and to focus on the experiential aspects of retail. Still, the vast majority of retail is bricks and mortar, and I think people are social animals still and like getting out and about, especially when they're on a vacation or at a resort area. So, we need to stay up with technology, but also focus on the joys of the physical experience, and that ranges from customer service to the physical aesthetic of the buildings and the space, the bookshelves, everything, and of course, our booksellers, customer service, and our selection of what we bring in. We're not trying to compete head to head with Amazon. We have a different value proposition, to use a technical jargon. And so we'll see. I think other retail is in similar situations. They need to focus on the experience of retail. Well, I'm a big fan of the festivals and bringing people in. Everything from the rec park, bringing in tournaments over there. I think that's a great idea. The Bluegrass Festival is a great idea. I hope that keeps going. Obviously, the horse show. So I think more of that type of thing that brings people here, that people get to know the area and hopefully become repeat visitors. I think that's important. If we can expand some of that into the shoulder seasons, would be great. And then I think we need to transition, to have an identity, more of an identity beyond the outlet phenomenon. A lot of empty space in town that needs to be repurposed and filled with interesting things, whether it's offices or other retail or housing, or something complete co-working spaces. I think the art spaces that have happened are great, but there's a lot of empty space in town that doesn't look good. So hopefully we can transition the retail outlook of town. I think the Depot Street project, I haven't really seen the latest renderings, but I think that will be great to have that big section of town, both more pedestrian friendly, but also more bike friendly, and more aesthetically pleasing with the trees and whatnot. So hopefully that'll turn out well. And so I think the town is doing some good things to make the town more vibrant and friendly to shoppers. So.
For several decades now, shopping and retailing in Manchester have been synonymous with retail outlet stores. So we stopped by the Michael Kors outlet and spoke with store manager Gretchen Rothstein to get her takeaway.
I think the retail world in general is facing the competition of the e-commerce battle between where is the customer going to shop, online or in store. In Manchester, I think we face the additional challenges of our tourism community, and there are so many variables there. If we don't have a great weather season, or if something else prevents people from coming to the area, that definitely has an impact on all of us. So I think that's two things that we face here. One that's pretty common in the rest of the retail world, and one that's a little more specific to Manchester. I think corporate companies in the retail world are recognizing more that we're going to have to give the customer an experience that they're not going to get from that computer screen or their phone screen. So marketing has a lot to do with it, analyzing the specific demographics rather than generalizing with something that's a little bit more of a blanketed marketing initiative. And then here in Manchester, we really focus on the customer experience and the personal relationships. So we want people to come back. And for us, our product isn't something that people necessarily need to come back once a month for, or even once every 6 months. So really giving them an experience that's going to bring us to mind when they have gift giving in mind, or even need, a referral to another location or another, looking for other products in our communities. I mean, I think we've all been there where we've ordered something online and it arrives and it's not quite what we were looking for. And then to have the opportunity to come into the store and look at the fabrics that are used and the materials that are used, and then to hear us speak to that also, I think is important to a lot of people. We need to change with the times, or we need to be moving forward with what the customer is looking for. I think if we stand still or remain committed to the old way of doing things, we're just going to be left behind. So I'm excited to see other brands and other designers, other stores in town figuring out how we move with the customer who's enjoying a new way of shopping. So I'm optimistic because as a consumer, it's also an enjoyable time to be seeing these new platforms available for us to shop.
And finally, to tie it all together, we traveled to Saratoga Springs, New York, to talk with a consultant at Camoin Associates, an economic development firm, where we got the big picture view from Alexandra Tranmer.
Consumers have been really empowered over the last even 5 to 10 years to really understand where their products are coming from, how they're made, the ingredients that go into them, the labor that makes certain services or products. And I think that has shocked some retailers, and that's really affected what consumers are willing to spend their money on. Certainly coming out of the recession and people being cost conscious and really thinking about where their pennies are going, feeling like they can spend money on quality goods for themselves and their families has been important. I think secondly, where we live and how we interact with our communities has changed. Again, in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, we've seen a return to cities, but even smaller communities that have a kind of urban feel but aren't necessarily mega centers. You've got your kind of small town where you can still run into the coffee shop and still meet your neighbor and say hi, but you've got a nice retail density and creates what we like to call a sticky experience. So you're not just going downtown for one reason, you're going down there for 2 or 3 reasons, meeting a friend, having a meal, getting some products that you need for home. It's really creating the experience and not just a good. You're not just going for a good, you're going for the experience. And I think both communities and businesses themselves that create an emotional attachment to the consumer. If a consumer can feel an emotional attachment to what they're purchasing, I think that is extremely valuable. And something that businesses are still trying to figure out, and communities as well are trying to figure out how to connect to their residents, to their visitors, and how to really create that sense of place, which I know that you had asked about. That's a jargony planning term that gets thrown around a lot. But when I think of sense of place, I think of it as that distinct experience. You could be walking on the street in Saratoga and not necessarily know walking down the street that this is Saratoga, that's the ice cream shop that's Kilwin's, or Cantina, the Mexican place that's got the patio outside. I think it really distinguishes communities from each other, because the truth is, you could go down the street and get the same goods, probably maybe at a different, a cheaper price in a different community. But if you feel that emotional connection to a community, you're likely going to choose to travel there over another one.
So retailing in the traditional bricks and mortar sense isn't going away, but it's harder to survive and make a profit if the game is simply business as usual. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.